Just 10 days before her tragic death on the 31st August 1997, Princess Diana confided a heart-wrenching regret to her close friend Rosa Monckton. She wished she had never given the explosive 1995 interview with BBC for the sake of her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. In a final private admission, Diana feared that speaking out publicly had done more harm than good, sacrificing their childhood under the glare of the world's spotlight. The Quiet Confession. In the quiet warmth of August 1997, just days before her tragic death, Princess Diana took what would be her final vacation. She was sailing the Greek Isles with her close friend Rosa Monckton, seeking peace away from the cameras and headlines. It was during this brief escape that Diana made a heartbreaking admission. She regretted doing the infamous 1995 Panorama interview. According to Monckton, Diana's concern wasn't for her own image or reputation. It was for her sons, Prince William, then 15, and Prince Harry, just 12. She feared the emotional cost it had placed on their young shoulders. This confession gains weight when you realize it came only 10 days before her death on August 31st, 1997. Diana, a global icon, wasn't speaking with defiance or seeking more publicity. In those final days, her thoughts had turned inward, to family, to legacy, to the emotional well-being of her boys. Her regret wasn't rooted in shame, but in maternal guilt, the fear that, in revealing her pain to the world, she had passed some of it on to her children. The setting was simple, a private conversation aboard a boat, no media, no royal protocol. Diana was no longer a princess in that moment. She was a mother, wrestling with a decision that had followed her for nearly 2 years. Her friend recalled her being frail, emotionally reflective, deeply concerned, and far removed from the confident figure seen on television during that famous interview. She didn't blame herself entirely. She knew the media had played a part, but the weight of what had been exposed lingered heavy on her heart. What makes this confession unforgettable is its intimacy. No press release, no public tears, just two friends speaking honestly in the final days of a complicated life. In a world where Diana's image was constantly shaped by tabloids, this quiet moment told the real story, not of a rebel princess, but of a vulnerable woman, unsure if her choices had protected the people she loved most. That moment of doubt brings us back to the interview itself, the 1995 Panorama broadcast. To understand Diana's final confession, we must revisit what she said on that night, and why it changed her life and the lives of her children forever. The 1995 Panorama interview. On the evening of November 20th, 1995, more than 22 million viewers in the UK tuned in to see Princess Diana speak directly to the world. The Panorama interview with Martin Bashir was unprecedented, a royal spilling secrets on national television. Diana opened up about her struggles with bulimia, her deep loneliness within the royal family, and famously stated, "There were 3 of us in this marriage," referring to Camilla Parker Bowles. It was a broadcast that would shake Buckingham Palace to its core. The immediate fallout was dramatic. Just a month later, Queen Elizabeth II wrote to both Diana and Prince Charles, urging them to divorce. By August 1996, their marriage was officially dissolved. But behind the tabloid frenzy, the real impact fell on William and Harry. At ages 13 and 11, they were suddenly caught in a firestorm of adult truths. Overnight, their mother's private battles became public property, dissected on talk shows and in headlines across the globe. The emotional cost of that interview went far beyond palace walls. In the years following, those close to Diana, including former staff and friends, noticed a profound shift. According to her former aide, she grew more guarded, more withdrawn. The catharsis she may have hoped for never truly came. Instead, the public exposure magnified her vulnerability. Diana began pulling away from even those she trusted, including Rosa Monckton, who later described her as becoming frail. It wasn't just a broken marriage that haunted her, it was the lasting impact on her son's emotional safety. Adding to the tragedy, years later, a BBC investigation revealed that the interview had been secured through deceit. Martin Bashir reportedly used forged documents and manipulative tactics to earn Diana's trust. What many viewed as a courageous act of truth-telling was now rebranded as exploitation. Knowing this context only deepens the weight of her final confession. Not only did she fear the consequences of speaking out, but it turned out her trust had been betrayed from the very beginning. With the truth of the interview now fully revealed, what followed was more than just royal fallout. It was emotional collateral damage that would change the lives of Diana's sons forever. Let's explore how that one broadcast fractured trust, childhood, and even brotherhood. The hidden consequence. After the 1995 Panorama interview, the royal world shifted, but so did the emotional landscape for two young boys. Prince William, then 13, and Prince Harry, just 11, were suddenly forced to process the raw pain of their mother's marriage in public. Reports later emerged that William, upon seeing the interview, was in tears, devastated not just by the revelations, but by the harsh spotlight turned on their family. It was the kind of trauma that doesn't fade with time, especially when it's replayed endlessly across screens and magazines. For William and Harry, the media became both observer and intruder. What was once a mother's attempt to reclaim her narrative ended up becoming the wedge that shaped, and possibly strained, their brotherhood. Over time, as public expectations grew heavier, cracks in their bond began to show. Royal watchers and insiders often point to this period as planting the seeds of division, where trust began to erode not just in the media, but perhaps in each other. Beyond that moment, Diana's withdrawal from public and personal circles added another layer of emotional complexity. According to Rosa Monckton, in the months following the interview, Diana became noticeably more reclusive. She avoided calls, ended relationships with some longtime confidants, and chose silence over spotlight. Her decision to pull back wasn't just about fear of the press, it reflected her internal conflict, as she worried that even her efforts to protect her sons might have unintentionally exposed them further. The tragedy isn't just in what was said, it's in what it set into motion. In the years that followed, both William and Harry approached fame and family differently. William embraced duty, structure, and monarchy, while Harry sought independence and emotional openness. Their diverging paths trace back to the same source, the loss of their mother and the media storm that followed her bold attempt to tell her truth. The world remembers Diana's voice, but it's her sons who lived with its echoes. As Diana struggled with the burden of public exposure, she also tried to leave behind something deeper than stories. She left warnings. In her final conversations and quiet reflections, she offered a message to her sons about what truly mattered. Let's uncover what those messages were and how they shaped William and Harry's lives. The Important Warnings Memento. Before her tragic death in August 1997, Princess Diana shared more than fears. She left behind teachings. According to Patrick Jeffson, her former private secretary, she imparted what he called important warnings to her sons. These weren't formal lessons or speeches, but heartfelt guidance, embedded in daily conversations, handwritten notes, and subtle observations. The essence of her message was simple but profound. Public love must be earned through private integrity. She believed royalty wasn't entitlement, it was service. One of Diana's clearest warnings was about the double-edged sword of fame. She had seen how the same public that adored her could also devour her. Her concern wasn't just for herself, but for William and Harry, who would inherit not only royal titles but also the same piercing public gaze. She reportedly told them never to chase headlines or court popularity. Instead, to stay grounded in empathy, purpose, and humility. It was Diana's way of shielding them, not with walls, but with wisdom. That message carried into the causes she championed. Diana often brought her sons to charity visits, hospitals, and shelters long before camera crews arrived. Her intention wasn't to teach them about optics, but about humanity. For her, it was vital they understood real-world suffering, real people, beyond the palace gates. Her emotional compass pointed away from royalty's glamour and toward compassion. That legacy became especially evident in William's homelessness work and Harry's veterans' advocacy in the decades to follow. At its core, Diana's guidance was a mother's attempt to ensure her children became good men, not just good royals. She knew she couldn't protect them from everything, not the press, not royal politics, not tragedy. But she could offer them a moral North Star. As Jephson once said, Diana hoped they'd remember that real power isn't in a crown. It's in kindness, service, and the courage to live truthfully, even in the most scrutinized family in the world. But even as Diana tried to leave behind wisdom, it was grief and guilt that lingered in her final days. One friend who witnessed her quiet transformation has now spoken out, revealing the emotional toll the media truly took on Diana's spirit. Let's hear what she had to say. Friend's testimony. In 2025, nearly 30 years after the dramatic events of the mid-1990s, a close friend of Diana's, Rosa Monckton, publicly revisited a deeply private confession. Monckton says that during a holiday in Greece in August 1997, only days before Diana's fatal crash on 31st August 1997, Diana confided that she regretted participating in the infamous 1995 Panorama interview. What made the confession so heart-wrenching? It wasn't about shame or embarrassment, but maternal guilt. Diana believed the interview might hurt her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. Monckton recalled Diana as feeling frail, burdened by regret, haunted by the thought that exposing her truth exposed her children too. This revelation matters all the more because of what we later learned about the interview's context. Investigations, including those summarized in the 2025 book Dianorama, revealed that the journalist behind Panorama, Martin Bashir, used forged documents and manipulative tactics to secure the interview. These tactics undermined Diana's trust in her own aides, including her private secretary, Patrick Jephson, driving wedges between her and many close to her. Monckton recalls that after the interview, Diana gradually withdrew, cutting off friends, changing contact numbers, becoming increasingly suspicious and withdrawn. She was no longer the public-facing princess. She was a mother, fearful and doubting. That transformation, described as strange behavior or frailty, was subtle, but real. Monckton's decision to speak now, after so many years, appears driven by a desire to show the true cost of that interview, not just for Diana, but for William and Harry. In a year when renewed scrutiny has exposed the interview's deceitful origins, her testimony reframes the narrative, not as a courageous act of truth-telling, but as a betrayal disguised as journalism. She warns that sensational headlines and deceptions exact costs, emotional, familial, lifelong. With this painful personal account laid bare, the consequences ripple forward. What happened in 1995 and 1997 didn't end then. For Diana's sons, for the monarchy, for the public conscience. The aftermath unfolded in fractured trust, changed lives, and a legacy of caution. Next, we'll explore how Diana's final warning continues to shape William and Harry's paths today and resonates across generations. The aftermath. In the decades since Diana's tragic death in August 1997, the imprint of her final fears and hopes has shaped the public and private lives of William and Harry, proving that a mother's warning can outlive her. Continuing her causes, from pain to purpose. Diana's compassion for the homeless, mental health sufferers, AIDS victims, and disadvantaged youth became a living legacy carried forward by her sons. William assumed patronage of Centerpoint, a charity for homeless youth, the same cause Diana supported, marking the beginning of his formal humanitarian identity. Meanwhile, Harry has carried forward Diana's boldness in confronting stigmas, from HIV/AIDS advocacy to initiating youth-oriented programs. Their efforts underline a promise Diana once whispered: to use privilege not for comfort, but for compassion. Mental health and vulnerability. The emotional trauma and public scrutiny following Diana's revelations and subsequent death haunted both brothers. Harry later spoke openly about grief, loss, and the mental health struggles that followed, calling for openness, therapy, and rejecting silence. That honesty echoes Diana's own earlier battles with depression and eating disorders, battles she bravely disclosed in the 1995 interview. This legacy of vulnerability has reshaped royal norms. Under their watch, mental health advocacy has become a public priority, breaking stigmas that once surrounded royal secrecy. William's leadership in campaigns, addressing crisis workers, frontline responders, rural mental health outreach, seems rooted in the grief and lessons passed down from Diana's final reflections. In interviews and public statements, both William and Harry have acknowledged the emotional cost of their childhood, grief, confusion, and public exposure from a young age. That history appears to influence how they parent their own children. There is a conscious effort to offer their kids privacy, normalcy, protection, and awareness, lessons likely inspired by Diana's regret and her final warnings about the dangers of exposure. What began with tragedy and regret, the fraught 1995 interview, Diana's private doubts, and the public storm that followed, has been transformed into purpose and permanence. Through homelessness awareness, mental health campaigns, charity work, and personal advocacy, William and Harry have turned their pain into action. Their lives testify to the possibility that legacy can evolve, from scandal and heartbreak to empathy, responsibility, and public service. In the end, Diana's warning about what fame and exposure can do, not just to her, but to those she loved most, didn't vanish with her. Instead, it lived on, and it turned into a mission. The media's betrayal. What at first appeared as a bold act of truth-telling publicly by Princess Diana, her 1995 interview on Panorama, was instead, as later revealed, a masterpiece of deception by the journalist Martin Bashir and a media institution willing to exploit vulnerability for headlines. Through the course of the next 2 decades, investigators and insiders uncovered that the interview was secured only after Bashir presented falsified evidence, fake bank statements, and forged documents to convince Diana's brother Charles Spencer, 9th Earl Spencer, and indirectly Diana herself, that staff close to her were leaking information and spying on her. This betrayal, confirmed by the 2021 official inquiry led by Lord Dyson, shattered trust and manipulated fear into a selling point. What makes this betrayal so chilling is not just the fabrication of evidence, but the cascading consequences. The forged documents played on Diana's insecurities and paranoia, fueling her distrust toward loyal aides and longtime friends. Former aides, like her private secretary Patrick Jeffson, later revealed how Diana began to see enemies within, turning away from people who once protected her. That isolation, that fear, wasn't born from truth or betrayal within her family. It was seeded by a reporter chasing a scoop and a media system that rewarded exposure over ethics. The institutional failure goes deeper. The broadcaster behind the interview, BBC, not only failed to check ethical boundaries, but actively covered up the wrongdoing. According to the Dyson report, several internal documents, including a key memo, have vanished from archives. Senior executives either ignored or downplayed early whistleblowing warnings. The BBC's initial 1996 internal review concluded Bashir was naive, but not malicious, a finding now seen as a grave mistake. Only in 2021, after renewed pressure and public scrutiny, did the BBC formally apologize and admit the journalistic and editorial breach. The betrayal's final casualty, arguably the most tragic, was Diana herself. Many close friends, such as Rosa Monckton, described the princess's final 2 years as increasingly frail, fearful, and withdrawn. Scholar-journalist Diana Rama, 2025, argues that the deception inflicted a psychological blow so severe it rewrote her life trajectory, influencing her trust, her relationships, and ultimately her sense of safety. She lamented how speaking out for truth turned into exposure for trauma. Having seen how deception and betrayal cracked open what should have been a courageous confession, we must ask, how did Diana herself reconcile this pain? And what inner conflict haunted her in those final days? In the next section, we'll examine the emotional struggle she lived between duty and motherhood, public truth, and private regret. The haunted regret. In the final months of her life, the public facade of the royal stage hid a private emotional battle. Close friends and former aides of Diana later revealed that she appeared frail, emotional, and unsettled, a shadow of the confident princess who once addressed millions. What once seemed like strength and candor in 1995 had turned into quiet doubt and guilt by late 1997. And in her private confession during that Greek holiday, she voiced regret over the consequences of her public decisions. Diana's 1995 interview on BBC's Panorama had broken taboos. She spoke of marital betrayal, loneliness, and even bulimia, subjects never before aired by a royal. At the time, many saw it as an act of courage, a step toward honesty, but the truth behind the scenes was dark. As revealed by a later independent inquiry led by Lord Dyson, the interviewer used forged bank statements to gain trust and manipulate Diana into cooperation. That betrayal fractured her sense of security, turning what she may have hoped to be catharsis into trauma. In the wake of that blow, Diana began to withdraw. Friends describe how she cut contacts, changed phone numbers, and distanced herself from those she once trusted. She feared that speaking out, revealing inner pain and vulnerability, had inadvertently exposed her children, her beloved sons, to emotional harm. That fear haunted her in her final days, and her confession to regret was not about public judgment. It was about a mother's guilt. As this chapter of regret closes, we move to the larger question. How deeply did this betrayal and exposure affect the legacy of Diana? And how should the unhealed wounds? More than 2 decades after the explosive Panorama interview of 1995, the consequences of what happened continue to echo, not only through the lives of her sons, Prince William, Prince of Wales, and Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, but in how the world now views privacy, media responsibility, and the human cost behind public figures. First, a wound that never healed. The revelations in the 2021 independent inquiry by Lord Dyson confirmed what many suspected, that Martin Bashir, the journalist behind Panorama's Tell All, used forged bank statements and deceptive tactics to win access to Diana. What once was called courageous truth-telling has been recast as manipulation. Betrayal by one of the world's largest broadcasters. The scandal stripped away the legitimacy of that interview and cast a long shadow over everything that followed. Because of this betrayal, Diana's warnings that public exposure can hurt not only you but those you love carry weight long after her passing, as noted in the recently published investigative book Dianorama, 2025, and corroborated by her former aides and friends. The fallout from the deception, isolation, exploitation, media pressure contributed significantly to her emotional decline in the final years. Second, a lesson for royals and public figures today. For William, Harry, and future generations of royals, and indeed any public figure children, Diana's experience serves as a cautionary tale. The blending of personal trauma with public spectacle. The ease with which media can manipulate truth, and the ease with which privacy can be sacrificed. These are not relics of the past. In 2025, with social media, constant press, and viral culture, the same dynamics are arguably stronger. The question raised by Diana's regret remains urgent. Can nobility survive without humanity? Third, a challenge to how the public consumes fame. Diana's story reveals that behind every headline, every royal appearance, every exclusive, there may lie hidden harm, emotional scars, broken trust, fractured families. As audiences, our appetite for drama and scandal can impose a cost on real people. Recognizing that calls for empathy, when we witness courage, vulnerability, or tragedy, especially involving children or emotionally fragile individuals, we must remember that what we see may only be a fraction of the truth. If the world remembers anything from Diana's life and last confession, may it remember this: that truth without trust becomes betrayal, and that titles, cameras, and history mean nothing if they come at the expense of love, safety, and dignity. What if Diana's warning had been heeded? What if, in the summer of 1997, Princess Diana's quiet regret, her late-night confession to Rosa Monckton that the 1995 interview might harm her sons, had reshaped how the royal family engaged with media and legacy? What if the final chapter of her life had unfolded differently? Imagining that alternate path reveals not only what was lost, but what might have been saved. First, imagine a childhood for Prince William and Prince Harry, protected from relentless exposure and public trauma. Without the 1995 BBC Panorama upheaval, perhaps their teenage years would have been less chaotic, less burdened by scandal, and more grounded in privacy and stability. They might have grown up not under global scrutiny, but under the protection of family. The trust between mother and sons, already fragile, might have remained intact, guarding their innocence for a few more years. Second, maybe the brothers would have maintained a stronger bond, not fractured by differing reactions to public pressure, personal grief, or media intrusion. Without that shock to their childhood, the seeds of later estrangement might never have taken root. Their shared grief might have remained a source of unity, not division. The tragic undercurrent of suspicion, betrayal, and trauma that colored their adult relationship might have been replaced by solidarity, mutual understanding, and less private pain. Third, the legacy of Diana might have followed a different trajectory. not defined by sensational headlines, but by quieter service. Instead of reacting to betrayal, the family might have built a model of royalty rooted in stability, mental health awareness, and discretion. William and Harry could still champion causes of compassion and empathy, but from a place of inner peace, not unresolved grief. The monarchy's public image might have evolved around privacy, dignity, and healing, rather than crisis and scandal. Still, imagining what might have been isn't just a counterfactual exercise. It's a warning, a reminder. Diana's final confession wasn't just personal anguish. It was a plea to value family over fame, to see children not as symbols, but as souls. Her regret lives on not only in memory, but in what we choose to learn. Perhaps her greatest legacy isn't headlines. It's the silent, painful testimony of what fame can cost. Diana's last warning, that fame and exposure come at a cost, still echoes today. Her regret over the 1995 interview warns of the emotional toll fame can inflict on children, even princes. William and Harry's lives, marked by public pressure, fractured relationships, and personal pain, remind us of what she foresaw. As fans and media consumers, we must reflect. Behind every headline lies a human being, vulnerable and searching for peace. Diana's legacy isn't just royal glamour. It's a call to protect innocence, value empathy over spectacle, and remember that even icons feel regret.